Welcome, my friend, to the On the Blue Line podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Mulder, and this is a law enforcement podcast where we discuss topics that will empower you on and off the job, whether you're tired or frustrated, feeling overworked, or struggling to balance work and home demands. Sound familiar? I know it is for me, that is for sure. Or maybe you simply need some encouragement. Well, I tell you what, you've come to the right place. This is the 94th episode of Morning Roll Call and the 147th episode of the podcast. And on today's podcast, we look back at 2022, we look ahead to 2023, and we remember our dear friend. If this is your first time listening, I want to welcome you. We have two weekly podcasts, Morning Roll Call, which is the one you're listening today. However, these have been a little bit different format for the month of December because we're winding down the end of the year and there's certain topics we've wanted to discuss. We should be back to our normal style Morning Roll Calls, in which we pretty much go over the news, recent events, law enforcement trends, and a variety of other topics that's going to give you something to consider as you begin your week. And we'll begin those back in January. And then the other show, which comes out on Thursdays, is the Interview Room. And in there, I sit down with guests from all walks of life and just people who can offer us something that we can learn from, or we can gain some knowledge that's going to be beneficial in yours and my personal life. If you missed last week, it was the first of 2 year-end specials, and there were 9 different episodes that we went back through, going back to 2019. I find it hard to believe that we've been doing this podcast since 2019, but we go back to those early episodes. If you haven't seen them yet, you've got to. The video is hilarious. It really shows how far we have come in some ways, and then is encouraging for how far we have yet to go. But it's definitely, hopefully, something that you enjoy, and the truths in that small, compact form. And then this coming Thursday is going to be part 2 of that. So there'll be another series of episodes that we're going to go back through from 2019, 2020, and in a small, compact section, give you something actionable for the week ahead. Both are released, if not on most podcast platforms. And then, of course, every episode is also available on YouTube and Rumble. Now, some of those compilation shows that I'm referring to are partially on video. The entire thing is on video, but there isn't video of some of those early interviews from 2019 and 2020. So I hope you had an amazing Christmas yesterday and got to spend some time with friends and family and loved ones. And if not, I hope that is in the future for you here in the coming days. As many of you know, if you're in law enforcement and you can resonate with, maybe this was your long weekend on. So then maybe today and tomorrow are your days off if you're listening to this when it released. And if so, I hope you get a chance to be around friends and family. And if not, at least take a little bit of time to decompress and to be by yourself. So this week, for the last morning roll call of the year, isn't it crazy to think another year has flown by? I just wanted to recap a couple things really quick. This is going to be should be a fairly short episode, and then we're going to get into something a little bit more serious. So really, it's been a great year. I know some of the other shows I listen to, they're doing like the top 10 news stories of the year, the top 15. That is the last thing in the world I want to do here at the end of the year. There is so much craziness going on, even some of the things as I was prepping for this that have happened in the last week. It's just bizarre. But as far as this podcast, as many of you know, we had about a year in there. So the podcast was started in 2019, but about in July of this year, we kind of had a reemergence, if you would, after not really releasing a whole lot for about a year. And since July, I'm happy to report that the listenership has gone back up, and that is 100% due to you. So thank you so much for listening and for telling others about the podcast. And with that increase, we actually are now higher than the numbers we were a year previous when we had taken a break for some things that we had going on. And you can always go back and listen to the episodes from earlier this year where I discuss what exactly was going on. So that's one of the good things that I want to say about 2022. Another good thing as far as the podcast has been the push towards video. We are just shy of 100 subscribers on YouTube, which I know for other YouTubers out there, that is laughable numbers. Fair enough, but we have to start somewhere, and it is a long ways from where we were. So for a long time, we weren't really concentrating on video. We weren't really pushing it out there that hard. And so if you're not following us there, please do so. You might be the 100th viewer or the 100th subscriber to the viewership on our YouTube channel. So something to consider, but that's been a great change. And something, again, that we've really kind of reinstituted back in July. And it's been awesome to see those listener numbers going up on there in the feedback that we're getting. And one of the other highlights of 2022 was the number of viewers on some of our social media clips. We've had a few of them hit around 40,000 views, and that has been pretty neat to see. And then the ripple effect from what that means for listenership and for people following the podcast on all the different ways that you can find it. So 2022 has been a great year, but as we like to do this time of year, we look back, but then we got to look forward, right? So what's new when we talk about On the Blue Line in 2023? Well, nothing earth-shattering. I've talked a little bit about what is coming, that I've been working with a marketing group based out of the UK, specifics on which I will give in the coming months. But we've been working on some things together that I'm excited about. The core of what we're doing isn't going to change a whole lot because the mission of what we're doing is so important when it comes to helping law enforcement officers in their personal lives. However, they are really instrumental in helping rebrand and helping me go back and say it better so that people understand what exactly we're doing, specifically those who haven't found the podcast yet and will in the future. So that's been an exciting process, and you should start seeing some of those changes in the next few months, especially probably the end of January, 1st February. You should start seeing some of those changes, maybe even some new logos, and definitely some changes with social media and some of the old titles of episodes and all that fun stuff that we do on the back end that hopefully gets the message out to more and more people. But again, none of this since 2019 would be possible without you. So thank you. The other thing that is kind of ramping up in 2023 and you will start seeing more about, I've only touched on a little bit, and that's the OTBL Life community. I may even change the name, but I'm working on exactly what I want it to be named, but it's a small group right now. But if that is something, then when it comes to this idea of community, of being around like-minded people, kind of a mastermind, I don't like that term. Everyone's got a mastermind these days, but group, a community of like-minded law enforcement officers working on life together, not cop stuff. That's not the point. It's life stuff. It's the stuff that really matters, right? Our relationships, our goals, all our mental health, all that. That's what this group is all about. It's something I've been working on for a few years. It's essentially what the Facebook group had originally been supposed to be, and it never quite got there. So this is something that I've been working with some other people on. I've mentioned it a few times. There is some information on the website. If you just scroll down the homepage there and you go to step 4 on the what to do next, you'll be able to read a little bit more about it. But if being part of a community like that is something that interests you, drop me a message on whatever format works best for you. The email is on there. It's feedback@ontheblueline.com. Or you can always DM me. I will answer most of them, provided I see them. They like to disappear on me on some of these groups if we haven't connected before. But definitely try to get a message to me. And if you do have an interest, I will get back with you and we can talk more about it and what that looks like. So that is what we are doing as of now. And then besides that, we've got some great guests lined up, and 2023, I believe, is going to be another great year and hopefully be the year that we can really push this message out to more and more people. So that being said, what I really want to do with today's episode is kind of do it in remembrance of a friend. I found out back in November that a friend of mine, Kevin Kasner, had passed away. You may recall that name. He was, and if you watched last week's episode where I went through the 9 early episodes, I specifically mentioned I was going to skip episode 3 because we would talk more about that today. Well, this is why. Because in episode 3 of the interview room, Kevin Kasner and I sat down. He actually was down in Florida, and I was able to meet him in the Clearwater area at a beautiful hotel overlooking the Gulf. I mean, it really was an amazing experience all the way around. And we got to sit there with our headsets on and have a great conversation about life. Looking back, he had been diagnosed with cancer at the time and was battling at that point and had been in a battle for several years, and just really a very strong person. And I think that, I consider Kevin a friend, a good friend. I got to know him because he was actually really close friends with one of my closest friends. So it was kind of a secondary relationship is how it formed, and I got to know him a little bit better. And they had his celebration of life recently, and I was unable to go due to mandatory training. Unfortunately, it was something I'd missed earlier in the summer that is required in the state that I am in. And when they did the reschedule date, I had no choice, and it coincided with when this celebration of life took place. One of the joys of law enforcement is sometimes you have no choice but to do whatever the training or the mission is on that day, and that's just what it is. But I wanted to include this tribute as we end this year because what we talked about in that episode, I think is very actionable advice for all of us in the coming year. So again, he was on the interview room, the 3rd episode, and he had started a men's ministry, which was kind of the basic thing that we talked about throughout our conversation called The Barn. Up in the Carolinas. And he was really doing some really great things for men and in this idea of community, like we just were talking about. And he asked some really good questions, like what does success mean to you? What is success look like? Because sometimes we get so easily distracted by what we define success or what the world defines success, right? Like what society defines success. Well, success is driving a certain car, living in a certain zip code, putting your kids in certain schools, maybe you attending certain schools. Maybe it's defined by clothing or defined by, being able to go to Starbucks every morning or Lord knows what. Well, is that really success? Is that your definition of success? Like at the end, if nothing, at the end of it all, in that moment, looking back, how do you define success? Do you define it by those things? Was it because you happened to get some certain label of clothing? I don't think so. For most people, for almost all of us, it's defined by our relationships. It's defined by personal relationships, maybe tertiary relationships of people that just moments in time, vignettes of our lives where we've been able to make a difference in their lives. And we may not even know what that means and what had happened. But years later, sometimes someone comes up to you. I think I'd mentioned it. I was, within the last few months, I was in some training and someone came up to me and was like, hey, I really enjoy listening to podcasts, really made a difference, that kind of thing. Awesome. What an amazing opportunity. And we don't even know the number of people who we have conversations with, who we talk to, who we interact with on a daily basis, whose lives have either been made better, maybe some encouragement, whatever it is, through those little things that we do. So there were some truths that came out of the end of this episode where Kevin and I were sitting down, and they kind of are all along this idea of community. So it was, your calling may not be what you think it should be, right? So sometimes we think we're supposed to go down a certain road, or we have this idea of what our idealistic future looks like, right? And maybe that isn't in line with our calling. Maybe it is. And sometimes those desires and so forth are in our heart and they become what we're supposed to do. But then other times, they're not. So sometimes your calling is not what we think it should be. And to that end, a point that he made was, who I am, quoting here, who I am, transcending what I am doing. It's kind of been the basis of the whole On the Blue Line, right? Who you are as a person, how you show up in the world is more important than the vocation that you have. Just because I serve in law enforcement doesn't mean that defines who I am. I'm more than that. I transcend that. And then he goes through some actionable advice about having a mentor, seeking friendships, not walking alone, not letting your job be what validates you, and being intentional in the things that we do. And he talks about how sometimes, we get in these disagreements with people and we may not get along too well with them. And so sometimes relationships are strained. And he talks about how, when you're in a mission, when you're in a battle, like when you're fighting together, those little things, they start to dissipate. In fact, it's kind of an argument I think that I'm making right now when we talk about teaming up and working together. Things in society, as the more they fall apart, those little disagreements become less and less significant. And what really matters are core issues, because we're in the same battle. Just using that terminology here, we're in the same battle together, whether it's for the hearts and minds of people, whether it's for, trying to salvage this country, whether it's trying to keep society safe, whatever that situation is, whatever you want to look at as your mission or battle, those little disagreements kind of dissipate. And what really matters is those core truths that hold us together. So, in summary, I learned a lot from having the opportunity to sit down with Kevin on a few different occasions. And it was such a great opportunity getting to know him and getting to be encouraged by him. From the day one of starting On the Blue Line, starting the blog, the positive feedback that he would give me, and the encouragement, because this is like any other pursuit, right? Any other creative pursuit, and anyone who is creative and does creative things, which a lot of us, maybe it's art or music or whatever it is. One of the things I think, at least I know I battle, and if I'm battling it, chances are you're battling it, is self-doubt, right? It's this is never going to be good enough. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I should just stop. Maybe you're watching this now and that's your thoughts of that's fine. But those are internal battles that we all go through. And one thing that Kevin always did was encouraged me for what I was doing and the importance of it. And that kind of really helped me solidify this idea that if I'm reaching one person, if just one of you out there right now, just you and I, are listening, and I can say something where I can speak truth or encouragement into your life, and that makes a difference, well, then it's all been worth it. And that truth is something that he really taught me. So I thought it would be fitting to end the year in the very last episode of, there'll be one more episode, but it's the compilation one for the interview room. But the very last episode of Morning Roll Call, where I just get to the opportunity to speak freely with you and I, to sit down and listen to Kevin take us out. So this is from episode 3 of the interview room, and it's only about 5 minutes long. And I just encourage you to listen to what he had to say. And if you want to go back and listen to that whole episode, it'll be linked up in the show notes. So I hope that you had a wonderful Christmas. I wish you a very happy new year. 2023 is going to be a great year. It's going to be a great year for us at On the Blue Line. It's going to be a great year for you. And I just thank you so much for staying with us through this all. So without taking any more time, here's Kevin.
What are those things that they should be intentional about today that, looking back, you say, this is an important step. These are the things that I wish I would have had in place, or I did have in place, that have brought me to, the outlook and where I am today?
Well, I think one would be having a mentor or a sage, praying for that, asking for that, looking for that. I would have loved to have had that at a younger age, and having the eyes to look for it. And as I mentioned earlier, you might not agree 100% with everything this person says. They might not agree with everything that you say or do, but there's a constant in a relationship there as a mentorship. And it's not always just about somebody that you can get something from. It's about someone that you can share things with. And I think out of that sharing, you will realize that you're going to get a lot more than you ever anticipated. I would have loved to have gotten some of this at a younger age, but I don't know what the reality of that is, having the ears to hear it. I was in the middle of making money and, working hard and doing all those things, and was successful, and, nobody could tell me anything. So it was ignorance on my own part. And you know what? That's just life experience that we all have to go through. So I don't know if there's a way to fix or circumvent that. It's just that be aware of those things and seek out friendships. I think is the biggest thing. To make yourself available for others. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. There's guys that I get along really great with, and some guys that, just make you want to slap them, and I'm sure they want to slap me. But that's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. But it all comes back to when you're in the middle of a battle, none of that stuff matters. It all dissipates. If there's a mission, if there's something to be done, guess what? Those guys are going to be there. And I've seen it happen lots of times. I think not walking alone and not letting your job or your ministry become your validating point in your life like I did. It's easy to get blinded by what we see as success or something working. And you just got to ask yourself the question. My brother-in-law used to say this, do you have it or does it have you? And maybe there's a balance there. But I think that through a lot of my experiences that there would be a lot of things to change, a lot of things to do better. And then, starting to realize there's some things I've done okay at. And that if people seek out friendships, seek out a mentor or a sage, don't walk alone. Be intentional about it. And I promise you it's hard. It's actually messy. But it's a beautiful thing. There's a scripture that where there's oxen in the barn, there's strength. If there's oxen in the barn, there's probably going to be some crap in there too. And so you got to take the good with the bad sometime. So I guess that's where I would just lead people or ask them to at least try to give some thought to it. Something that's maybe a little different than what they're doing right now. And some of these guys are probably doing this now. I know that there's guys that get together, and I would imagine within law enforcement that there's some pretty good friendships that have developed within there. And I think that's awesome. And if they allow themselves to get beyond the veneer and lose the ability to bullshit, I think it's a wonderful thing. If you're not in that, I would just ask why not? And why wouldn't you want to be? Because there's a lot more available for you. And I think that it makes us all better people in the end. And it allows us to probably deal with life a little bit better. The good, the bad, know it, and just knowing that there's some other folks there that have your back, that you don't have to fight alone, and that they've been through it too.
Kevin, you're going to be missed, buddy. That does it for this week's Morning Roll Call. I'll see you next Thursday in the interview room. But in the meantime, and as always, I'll see you out there on the Blue Line.